So I think we'll make a start now. I know a few people more will probably drift in as we go along. So welcome very much to this webinar. We are recording it because not everyone can make it. So if you don't want your face to appear on a recording, keep your cameras turned off. As we go through, I mean, this is here to answer your questions. So if you have questions you go along, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll try and pick them up as we go along, but at the end as well. And feel free to get involved in finding out whatever you want to find out about the CDT. I will start by just giving you a little bit of a presentation and a chat and give you an overview of the CDT. And then I'll bring in, we're very lucky to have Adrian Gaylard from JLR, who's one of the company's partners involved, who's going to give you a perspective from a company. And we also have two PhD students who've been slightly delayed, but will hopefully be here halfway through to come and give a perspective from current PhD students as well. So I'm Trevor Cox. I direct the CDT in Sustainable Sound Futures. I am based at the University of Salford, but as you can see here, if you wouldn't mind mute, if you wouldn't mind keep yourself muted. If you can see here, it's a collaboration between Salford, Bristol, Sheffield and Southampton universities and a very large number of project partners, as well as I'll explain. So the idea in this webinar is to give you an overview of what this CDT is, the Centre for Doctoral Training, give you a sense of what makes it different from studying a standard PhD, give you an overview of the application process, but also give you a chance to ask questions and find out more information. All the information you could want is up on the Sound Futures website, soundfutures.salford.ac.uk. But also, if you can't find what you want and you have questions later, feel free, please get in touch with us as well. So what is the Sustainable Sound Futures CDT? Well, it was kind of funded by looking at noise pollution as being a really significant issue that we have to deal with in society. So it causes things like cardiovascular disease, it harms learning in schools and productivity, it causes things like sleep disturbance. So that was our kind of major sell, but we're slightly more broader than that in acoustics, because it's not all just about the harms of noise. There's other things that go on, but that was our major sell, is trying to make a more sustainable sound future, and hence the name of the CDT. We've just launched only a few weeks ago the projects for 2026, and they give you a sense, if I list them here without going through them all, of just the breadth of this. So if you think about sound, is kind of everywhere. You've got music, you've got speech, you've got noise, you've got natural sounds. There's lots of sounds, and therefore there's lots of angles to research and lots of disciplines involved in the research that might be involved. So the first one here actually is funny enough, is the JLR one that Adrian's involved with. So that's about automotive, obviously. But if you look down a bit further, you're looking about things like Sonos and personalized auditory and listening experience. So that's about sound reproduction. You've got restorative urban green environments, which might be a more sort of a geography soundscape kind of project. Then if you go back down to Sheffield, you've got machine learning algorithms. So you've got a sort of computer science kind of side, looking at wind turbine noise, and also looking at treatment for tinnitus using metamaterials. So you already get a sense there from just those two universities, Salford and Sheffield here up in the north, of quite a diversity of backgrounds that could come into the CDT. It could be social science, it could be computer science, it could be engineering, it could be physics, lots of different backgrounds involved in our CDT. Going southwards a bit to Bristol and also down to Southampton. So in Bristol, a lot of the projects centre around aeroacoustics. You'll see a lot of things about propeller noise and aeroacoustics working with, and you'll see the companies listed. So one of the features of our CDT is most of the projects have a company or a partner involved very intensely with the project. So Bristol's got this emphasis on aeroacoustics, as you can see from their project list. Down in Southampton, it's broader, but you can see you've got things like wildlife issues around underwater in that case. You've got some more aircraft ones, and you've also got vibroacoustics, so vibration and acoustic ones as well. So a huge variety of projects. So hopefully one of those kind of is kind of an area you're kind of interested in. So I thought we might start with you, Adrian, if that's okay, and just kind of chat to you about what you get as as an employer, but also you've recently done a PhD, so you've been in a CDT, haven't you? So you have a bit of an impression, not this one, a different one. So Adrian is a real key partner for us working at Jaguar Land Rover down in the Midlands, a really important partner. It's already funded one PhD and is hopefully funding another one next year. So Adrian, I suppose over to you a bit, and you know, what would your sell be for why to do a PhD?
Right, that's a really good question. I think the answer is a personal one. So we've all got to decide, you know, it's a big investment when you decide to do a PhD, and each of us will have our own motives. I did one quite late career, so I did mine 2013 to 2018 at the University of Warwick, and that was, you know, I was in my late 40s, going into my early 50s, and I had reasons for doing that. You know, the people on this call, I'm guessing, are going to be quite a bit younger than I was, but have their reasons. So you've got to be clear on your personal reasons. I think for me, one of the exciting things about doctoral study is it's a voyage of discovery. You are trying to find out something new that no one else has spotted before, and I think found that really exciting. And then if you've got industrial involvement, probably going on to a little bit of why with my Jaguar Land Rover hat on, we do sponsor PhDs, is that new knowledge can be really useful to a company. We can apply it and start to move through from, if you like, the discovery, the new knowledge, the science into the engineering, and then start to affect people's everyday experiences in their lives through whatever products or services that underpins. And I think that's pretty exciting.
And I guess, I mean, what do you, as well as getting that knowledge, what do you get from the perspective of the kind of employee you get if they've gone for a PhD, and is that crucial for some of your roles in JLR?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. So when I started with JLR 24 years ago, I'm trying to think, were there any PhDs in the department? There was one. It was a much smaller department, and the department manager had a PhD. And now I think if I look around departments, I work in aerodynamics, which includes aeroacoustics, hence my interest here. How many have we got? 8 maybe across the department. So it's been something that's increased over the years as we've come to appreciate that we're trying to do harder and harder things. So I guess the work of a PhD, doing a PhD, is to do the discovery part. It could be kind of broad brush about it. Then if you get a job in industry, your job becomes the applications part of the journey, which is, I think, a really exciting one. So for a company like JLR, we make premium cars. Now, every year competition gets harder. Every year regulations get stricter. And every year our customers expect more of us, and we ask them to pay us more money as well. So they should expect more of us. And for our premium product, you know, it can be quite, from my perspective, you know, quite an expensive purchase. So I think they should expect to get a good deal from us. So we need to do that, we need to discover new things, and we need to apply new things. And that's really where the PhD comes in. So for an advantage for an employer, once you've done your PhD, not only do you have a lot of knowledge about a particular area, but it's that kind of training in how to find things out, that training in the kind of research and discovery mindset, that ability to really get a mastery over a body of knowledge and see what's missing and then fill in the gaps. And that's a powerful skill, and you need it on the, if you like, when you come to the applications phase, as you need it for the discovery phase as well.
Yeah, I think that's it as well, because when you're in an area of work, you suddenly have new areas that aren't part of your PhD. To take example, I'm obviously an academic that needs a doctorate to be an academic. My original research in PhDs was about room acoustics. I'm now working on hearing aids, but you have that ability to sort of kind of go, this is the kind of, how do you approach research? I can now apply it to another area of acoustics, and that's another skill set that I think you really develop as a PhD. But the other,
sorry, I
sorry.
can't jump in there because that's a really important point. I mean, I started out as a physicist, right, and then I converted to engineering. And in my time here, what have I looked at? I've developed new methods in computational aeroacoustics. I've done methods in aerodynamics, which is my principal interest. I've done developed my doctorate was in the mechanisms for dirt deposition on cars. So it can take you some widely varying places, and you find yourself always having to apply yourself to new problems and new challenges. And I think that's the intellectual flexibility that a PhD brings.
And do I remember right, you studied in a CDT, didn't you? Is that correct? So
I did,
yeah. So what's the difference between a CDT and a normal PhD from your perspective?
Right, okay. Are you going to catch me out now? So I've also been an industrial supervisor for I think about 12 PhDs. I set up about 13 PhD programs, so seen it from a couple of sides. I think a traditional PhD can be a little bit of a lonely experience. So maybe you've one or two people reporting into a supervisor. Depends how busy that supervisor is, but it tends to be pretty much a solo activity. Tends to have less in the way of kind of educational courses, so it will have some these days. Whereas a CDT, you're definitely part of a cohort. CDT I was in the first year, we did sort of projects together with members as a cohort, and I think that gives you a lot more support. You've got more people around you doing kind of similar things, if not the same thing. More people to talk things through with and to see what their experiences are like. And even if they're doing a really different project, they might be using some similar techniques, or it may even be, commiserating on reviews you've got back for the papers you're trying to publish and kind of sharing that common experience. So I think it's the essence is you're more a part of a learning community, I think, as part of a CDT, and probably less part of a very small group, maybe attached to a particular academic. I just think it gives you broader support.
Yeah, and I think you get broader knowledge from working across the CDT as well, which is the advantage we talk about in the CDT, because your PhD will give you that real narrow depth. PhDs tend to be narrow and deep, but the CDT gives you the width. And in fact, our first year cohort has just come back from a winter school last week. We're down in Southampton, and we're working on a group project, getting to know each other and working on some designs of open plan offices was the subject they actually looked at in their group project. Thanks very much, Adrian. That's much appreciated for you dropping in this today. Well, I haven't got any questions in the chat, but maybe some will flow a bit later on, but much appreciated.
Thank you. I should hang around in the background for a bit.
So kind of why do a PhD? We've touched on some of this already, so I won't. But I would say you want to be really motivated by wanting to discover new things, because it's different to a talk course. You're not kind of where if I do a talk course, I'm tending to tell students things that I know the answers to, whereas research, by definition, you don't know the answers. So you need to be able to sort of kind of deal with uncertainty and curiosity to find new knowledge. You need to be able to be interested in sort of burrowing away at whatever you're doing, whatever technique. I've mentioned coding or prediction models or developing theories. It depends on what PhD you do, but you've got to have that sort of interest in really burrowing away in detail about something with a technique that interests you. And you're okay with uncertainty. There isn't a known answer when you start this PhD off, so you're finding it. So there isn't, your supervisor doesn't magically have in the back drawer, the answer to everything. You're finding that as you go along. So you need persistence and resilience. You need to be keen to join in with the CDT, which is about making a more sustainable sound future, because that's part of it. So you've got to have an enthusiasm for joining as a CDT. If you're not going to want to do that cohort thing, you should go somewhere else for a PhD. It's very much about cohort plus PhD. And we talked about jobs. I would recommend, by the way, we have a couple of PhD students who might be here yet, or I'm going to talk to them a bit later on and give you a sense. But if you don't know anyone who's done a PhD, wherever you are based in the university, go and find someone who's done a PhD and chat to them about what it's like. And if you don't know anyone, drop us an email. We'll put you in contact with someone. Get a sense of what a PhD is like to study, because it's a different beast, and make sure it's the kind of thing that you want to do. And also make sure where you're staying. We've got 4 universities here. The supervisor you're working with and the environment is the kind of place you'd want to work, the kind of person you'd want to work with. You work very closely with the supervisor for 4 years, so you want to be the sort of person you can imagine getting on with in terms of working. So the CDT is training 70 PhD students over 5 cohorts. If you start in 2026, you'll be part of the second cohort. As indicated in those projects, they're funded by industry, public and third sector. I've mentioned universities, and there's over 50 project partners. And as we've mentioned already, this cohort effect is a really important part. And we'll talk about what the CDT training is a bit later on. Well, not very much in a while. If you want to go online, you'll find the project, all our partners, and you can read them in a bit more detail. But we have a lot of industry involvement because there is this need for sort of more work done in acoustics, more work done to make sound better, and more people wanting employees who can do that for them. What you also access with the CDT is state-of-art facilities. So you get a possibility of going to the different universities and using their facilities. For example, my students here up in Salford will be going down to Bristol in February, if I remember the month right, and going and trying out some of the wind tunnels in Bristol, where the national centre, one of the national centres is. So you get a chance to use some different facilities that are not just in the university you're registered at, but also the other universities as well. And there's a few lists there. I mean, we have quite an amazing range of facilities available at 4 universities. And then if you add the project partners who you might be doing research with, it's even broader than that. I could answer your question in a moment, Sophia. Thank you very much. So just to give you a sense of what it means, directly to you, these are funded positions. So you get a stipend, a tax-free stipend. It's about nearly 21,000. We don't know the rate for next year. We do have a small number of enhanced stipends for widening participation. To answer your question, Sophia, in the chat, we do have some international places, but most students will be home students because of the funding. So there's 2 caps we're working with. I won't bore you with the details, but it means that we don't have as many international places as home student places. So home students have a much better chance of funding just because of that reason. But your international student, still please apply, because there will be some international places available as well. You also get bench fees. It's called research training support, and that pays for you to go to conferences, lab consumables, do a placement, those kind of things as well. All the cohort training, like the winter school I just mentioned that just happened, that's all covered. That's covered, your travel assistance and going to Bristol for the wind tunnels or that kind of stuff is all kind of covered. The other thing I would say, Adrian had mentioned he started a PhD late. We do have quite a lot of people who've been in employment and have come to do a PhD. So it's not just people who are coming straight off a degree. There's quite a diverse range of ages in our PhD cohort. And we do actually also have people who are open to PhD doing part-time, but you have to talk to us. If you're interested in part-time, come to us, because it depends a bit on the funder whether it's possible or not. To answer the question, most PhD topics are open to international students. If there's any restrictions, it's noted on our website. So there are some restrictions around some of them, but it should be noted on our website. But Fiona will probably comment, so she's probably more up to speed about which ones are. So as you said, alongside doing a PhD, so there's a kind of normal PhD process going on here. You register at home university. For example, you register at Salford, you have a supervisor, and you go through all this kind of normal PhD process. You have this cohort training, which is what makes the CDT slightly different. So this is cohort-based training, trying to get a community, as Adrian says, important for support, but also for broadening your skills and understanding, making you more capable of working interdisciplinarity, helps you with kind of gaining impactful research and developing sort of personal skills. So next year I'm going to be running some public engagement stuff so people can learn a bit more about how to communicate their science to a broader audience. It's roughly like 1 day of training to 3 days of research, which is a bit like doing a master's than a PhD. It's kind of broadly that kind of range of training. So the types of activity, as I said, we just had a noise sandpit, but there'll be group project work. There'll be particular days where you go and meet together to do particular things. So, for example, the students coming up to Manchester to go and visit a venue called Stoller Hall and measure it in January. There's also your individual PhD study. There's this placement as well. And so that will be a chance. Might be one placement with the company who's kind of helping funding the project, or it could be a placement somewhere else to try and develop your broader skills. And then we're running journal clubs. For example, we had one with the epidemiological expert in noise problems only last month. Next month, this month and next month it's going to be on the effect of noise on wildlife. So we have these sort of online training events as well. So to go into the application process, So the basic process is you apply to us, the CDT, to get a place on the CDT is the first process. So you apply to us, you get offered a place on the CDT. Then, if you get offered a place, we then get you through the university system that then registers you. So you apply to us first, forget all the normal university systems, just apply to us and get a place first. Once you've got a place on the CDT, we will support you to get through those university systems that you have to get through as well. The process is pretty standard to what you might expect. There are application forms on our website. They're available now. We will shortlist off those. We will carry out interviews and then we will make offers. So it's pretty much a standard interview kind of process. And to give you a timeline, the deadline is the 11th of January. Interviews in January or February and offers in March is what we're kind of aiming for. What we're looking for? Well, the universities have minimum criteria. So a 2-1 minimum in an undergraduate or a master's degree is what, if you haven't got that, you won't get on. I would say, particularly for the international places, a first-class degree would probably be a minimum to be able to get a place because of the competition for places. You must have a degree subject that is relevant in some way to the PhD you want to study, and that will vary across the project. So have a look at the project. And, so for example, if you're looking at the social effects of green space, you're going to need a different skill set to solving complicated partial differential equations to aeroacoustics. So you need to sort of think about whether your PhD topic matches. Any questions, get in contact. And for international students, there's an English language proficiency test. But alongside that, you really want to be, you really have to have that sort of kind of PhD mindset, which talked about already, and then also that mindset of wanting to engage with the CDT. So we have an application form. You apply for 3 projects. You'll see the list of projects there. It'll be asking you things like, why do you want to study for a PhD? Why do you want to study in the CDT? What education do you have? How does that fit into, and other experiences? So, and you talk about what research areas interest you and how it fits with the projects. So this is the kind of, I don't think it's very surprising, but you're given some thousands words. I'm trying to remember, I think it's 4,000 words to answer these questions. And sort of sell yourself alongside the normal CV sort of questions, which are around sort of what qualifications do you have. In terms of the application process, we like to support underrepresented groups as part of our widening participation. So if you are applicable for UK fees, then we can give you support under these categories. What support in this case means mentoring. So we will help you with mentoring by helping you getting through the application process and kind of supporting. The idea here is in applying for PhD, there's a bit of a hidden curriculum, which means basic stuff that people may not know needs to be done right from underrepresented groups. So if you're interested, there's a form to fill in and we can give you some mentoring support. It's broadly speaking, females, because there's a huge underrepresentation of females in acoustics, and things like widening participation for people first into university. Now, I'm hoping that Sarah and Joanna are on the call now. I'm so busy talking, I haven't been able to have a chat. Oh yeah, so I don't know who put their thumbs up, but someone's here. So I don't know if you want to make yourself visible, but otherwise I shall ask you a few questions. So Joanne, are you online?
Excuse me, can you? Joe is on now. Sorry.
Excuse me, can you hear me? I want to ask a question.
Yeah, can we just get through the rest of the talk first? Would that be okay?
Okay, sure.
Yeah, but feel free to do it at a moment. Sorry. So is Joanne or Sarah there?
Sarah's online.
Hello, Sarah. Sorry.
Hello. No worries.
So Sarah's, you can see on the left-hand side. Maybe introduce yourself first, Sarah.
Yeah. So my background's probably not, I guess, the classic one, route into acoustics here. My project's looking at noise pollution impacts on wildlife. A bit about myself, essentially. So I'm a mature student. that's probably one of the things that surprised me the most about the CDT, is that lots of people are working alongside doing it as part-time, or they are older and have been working for 10, 15 years already. But my background is in animal care and also lecturing in animal behaviour and welfare. But I also do a lot of stuff with sort of wildlife recording, which uses obviously a lot of bioacoustics. And I've also got a couple of publications around the impact of the captive environment on animals, which includes the noise that's produced by humans as they're driving around a safari park, or humans as they're walking around a zoo and things like that. So yeah, my project is with DEFRA. So Trevor mentioned that there's lots of different industry partners per project. Mine's with DEFRA. So for anyone that's unfamiliar, it's one of the government agencies. So it's Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. And they kind of look after everything that's to do with wildlife, any kind of like zoonotic disease and things like that. So they're a huge sort of umbrella department associated with the government. And they're interested in noise pollution impacts on wildlife, essentially, because we know that there's harmful impacts on humans. And there's lots of sort of work ongoing in that, but there's already environmental impact assessments that take that into account. So we measure noise as standard when we're planning new dwellings and things like that, so new housing developments, etc. But this isn't really looked at in terms of non-human animals, and so hopefully that's what I'm going to be able to do. It's focused on British animals because it's the UK government that's the ones that's funding it. But obviously I can take you can take all the information that you can gather around it. So in the picture here is me with a giraffe. I definitely won't be studying giraffes in the UK, but there's lots of different things that go on about noise and how it can impact animals and things like that. Trevor, do you want to ask me a different question, or I'll just keep? I feel like I'll just.
I'll keep asking. So I guess how are you finding? You're new to the CDT, and as you kind of indicated, you come from a wildlife background, which is probably on the most extreme ends of the sort of people we have. So what's it like studying on the CDT so far? I know it's only been a couple of months, so maybe a slightly cruel question, but what have you found it?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, so I only started in September. So we had our induction on something like the 19th of September, and I finished my job on the 18th of September. So it is very, very new. But to be fair, we've had quite a lot. We've already done quite a lot of stuff. So initially we had, just sort of your general induction kind of things and introductions to supervisors. Trevor's actually my supervisor as well, so that's quite helpful, as well as being a part of the CDT. And I've also got a different supervisor in the School of biology. But the CDT itself's been really good at Salford specifically. So I'm at Salford, sorry. So at Salford specifically, we've got a PGR office, a PhD student office, and we're kind of all together in the same room, which is really handy for sort of bouncing ideas off each other. We've also got the sort of tour element that Trevor mentioned. So we've been doing a module all together, which is quite helpful, especially the workshops. Again, coming from sort of a slightly different background, even just the sort of programming language is different. So the biology school all use R, we use Python and acoustics. And so learning to do that has been quite good. But again, having other people that have been using that for years is really good to sort of bounce ideas off. And then we've just got back, I think, Trevor, you already mentioned this. We just got back from a winter residential at the University of Southampton. So we were there last Monday to Friday, so just back over the weekend. And that was really useful because then students from all 4 of the unis managed to actually get together and meet each other in person. Because I've been sort of Teams messaging and emailing people for the first few months as we go on. And so actually it was really nice to be able to put sort of faces to names and things. Everyone's super friendly. I'm not just saying this either, Salford, very, very friendly. Went to Southampton, everyone really friendly. And everyone's got their own kind of, so Fanuela's a program manager, but each uni has their own kind of point of contact as well. And so we met Miranda, who looks after Southampton down there. And yeah, everyone's just really helpful, really friendly, no stupid questions kind of thing. You can ask what you need to ask and get the info that you need to get. But yeah, it's been good. I mostly just like having people to bounce ideas off. I can think of nothing worse than squirreling away in a cupboard by myself all day. But yeah.
And what led you to choose to do a PhD then?
I looked at doing a PhD a few years ago. So after I finished my master's, I was like, oh, I'd love to do a PhD. I love to learn and things like that. It just didn't work for me at the time. And then this PhD specifically essentially was because I'd been teaching for 3 years, and although I love teaching, I love being student facing and things, the part of my job I liked the most was teaching myself new things or reading like something that had just been published and was brand new, and then getting my head around that, and then making my own sort of little projects and doing bits of research. And so I basically just wanted to do that full time, rather than it being sort of an add-on into my job. And from a it's not a negative point of view. It's a really important thing to think about, but also the financial side of things with the CDT as well is that I couldn't have afforded to self-fund a PhD. I would have been able to afford to do one several years ago, and so it was just sort of personal circumstances, plus the fact that I just really wanted to focus on a project I could really sink my teeth into. I focused all my time just learning and getting to the bottom of something that someone else hasn't already answered, I guess.
And a final question. Any advice, you went through the application process we run, any advice for applicants who are kind of, looking at this for the first time?
I'd say just definitely go for it. Don't get the whole imposter syndrome thing of, oh, maybe this isn't for me, maybe I can't do that. If you're interested in it and you've got the appropriate background and you meet the requirements and stuff, no, you're not the person to say whether or not that you can do it. It's the people that are interviewing it, and you just have to put yourself across. So I'd say definitely just go through the requirements that are on there, get your head around the subject if it's sort of one that you're already really familiar with, and just do your background reading and things like that. Just read around it. And then on the flip side of that, make sure it's definitely something that you want to do, because obviously you're committing sort of 3 to 4 years of your life to this one subject. So it's got to be something that you're really, really, really passionate about, and that you want to carry on learning about for that amount of time. So I guess 2 things. Make sure you definitely want to do a PhD and you're really interested in the project. And then on the flip side, if you're really interested but you think, oh, maybe I can't do this, don't let you be the person to tell you that, because I nearly didn't apply thinking, oh, I won't get that. And obviously I did. So just always push yourself, and just, that's probably my advice.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yeah, actually, imposter syndrome is not that uncommon in PhD students. So if you feel a bit like that, you'll be at home. It's not that unusual. Kieran, you had a question that you wanted to ask, and I was kind of asked to postpone. I wonder if you want to unmute now, you could ask now if you wanted. Or while Kieran's thinking about his question or her question, if anyone else wants to put a question in the chat or unmute, I think we're hoping to be joined by another PhD student. They're not quite here yet. They got a bit delayed. But has anyone else got any questions they'd like to ask?
I'm also happy to reply to emails if people want to ask questions secretly after a meeting or anything like that. Just find my email and feel free to send them over.
Hiya, just a little question with regards to the application process and just the interactions between, I suppose, the researchers and the supervisors. Does the CDT set the tone for that sort of interaction, or is it a bit more freeform? Do we have to work through the CDT if accepted, of course? Do we have to work through the CDT? What is the primary point of contact, or would there be a more direct relationship between the researchers and the universities?
So you mean once not as part of the application, but actually if you got accepted when you're actually here?
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, so you're registered at whichever university you're based at. So either at Salford, Sheffield, Southampton or Bristol, you'll be a PhD student at one of those places. You register at one of those places, and the processes for running your PhD are whatever the university runs. I mean, they're all broadly the same, but they are slightly different. So here at Salford, just talk about Salford because obviously I know it. You get allocated 2 supervisors. Whether they're co-supervisors or joint supervisors, it depends on the project and how that's set up. So typically on my PhD, for example, with Sarah, we actually have an external advisor as well. So we actually have 3 people in the room. We try and meet on a weekly basis. Although it didn't happen last week because of the winter school, so sometimes it get cancelled. But a week to every fortnight, I meet up with my PhD students, and we have an hour-long meeting to sort of kind of go through progress on it. Now, what happens at each individual university will depend on their sort of kind of regime, but that's a kind of fairly typical regime for supervising PhDs. Sometimes they're done in group supervisions and individual supervisions, so there are other regimes for doing this. But yeah, you want to, if you're applying for a project, the projects have named supervisors, you could ask them what their normal sort of supervision regime is, how do they run their group, and how do they do that, because it is down to individuals. But there also will be university stipulations. So, for example, at Salford, there's a stipulation for minimum number of interactions, and there's records kept of these. So it varies between universities. Does that give you a sense?
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, I think one thing I did say, make sure it's an environment and a project and a team you want to join. If I was doing a PhD, I'd be wanting to find out, unless it was the university I was at, I'd want to find out what the supervisor's like, what they're like working with. And I would kind of probably contact them and ask them about it. They've got the project there, they're interested in getting people. Oh yeah, as Sam asks, would you recommend having a chat? So no, it's fine to talk to the supervisors, because there's also CDT people on the interview process as well. So there will be neutrals around as well. But no, it is absolutely fine to find out. And I would do, what you've got online is maybe a paragraph, 2 paragraphs, technical detail of the project. It's not very much. So why don't you find out? And when you're finding out, I would think not just about the area you're in. Is this, do I want to go and work on? Well, I'll pick JLR just because Adrian's been here. Do I want to go work for JLR on their particular problem? Does that excite me? But also, does the techniques you might use excite you as well? So you can have PhDs in this area where you spend your entire life sat in a computer just programming machine learning algorithms. But for some people, that will seem like hell they'd like to avoid, and they want to go and do measurements. So are there measurements involved, or is it a mixture? So it's finding out a bit about the practical day-to-day part of what you would actually do in this is quite important as well. So find out about not only just who you're working with, what the project is on from a subject point of view, but the kind of techniques. Does that excite you as well? There's lots of questions. It's great. I'm just trying to keep up with them. Do you know how many candidates would be accepted for each position? There is one place per position. I don't think there's any ones where there will be multiples. And in fact, there's more project titles than there are we'll be able to take on as PhD students. So broadly speaking, it's one place. But I would note in somewhere like Bristol, which happened last year, there are projects which are quite close to each other. And so we have people who might have applied for one, but actually started on a slightly different one, but was in a very related area. So that does kind of happen if people move between related areas. Jay, supervisors saying they're unsure. Yeah, if they're unsure, ask them to contact us. But basically, the permission is yes, please talk to your supervisor, make sure it's the project you want to do, and that's absolutely fine. So Christiana's is asking about BSc in architecture and MSc in construction project management, be a suitable background. We don't. I think one thing to say is, I'm going to say, is it most people don't have a acoustics degree? I think that's probably fairly safe to say, because there's not many people study acoustics. So it's not unusual for people to start a PhD in acoustics, having done, I did physics, Adrian mentioned physics. I can't remember Sarah's, but I presume it was in biology or zoology. With mechanical engineers, civil engineers, electrical engineers, there's a huge variety of backgrounds, geography, we have people, and we have had architects join. It's be a question in that case of looking at the projects you're interested in and see if you think, I've got the skill set that meets it. You all have to learn new skills when you go on a PhD. This is not an exact mapping, but have I got the background you need? I can't think of a project off the top of my head, so you'd have to look, Christiana, so what's there. Did you want to comment on that, Adrian? Is that the reason you turned your camera on, or you just thought you ought to be visible?
Yeah, I can see a question coming up about industry collaboration, so I thought I'd make myself available for that. But yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, we all end up in a slightly different place to the topic we studied, and yeah, as I mentioned before, and you pointed out, I did maths and physics. I had no fluid mechanics at all on the course I did, and I've ended up with a career in aerodynamics. So it's about having something that gives you a bit of a start. And for me, physics was a way into understanding fluid mechanics as I came across it in industry, but it's also about having to learn as you go. So I think as long as your background gives you that ability to get a start into the subject, then the rest is about you mastering it.
I think that's a really nice answer. And Adrian, so I'll ask you the question. Some projects are industrial collaboration. Can you explain some about it? The presence in industry is needed. Can we use their facilities?
Okay, so I think it will vary between industrial partner. So I know some industrial partners have really nice test facilities in acoustics, and can give some time on their facilities. I know that happens. More commonly, they'll be able to provide you with some data for your project as well to augment what you're able to do in the university setting. For us in air acoustics, predominantly is what we're interested in. Actually, we are doing some acoustics projects as well, which I'm helping set up. It can be that we don't have any suitable in-house facilities, and we're looking for a university facility. We've identified, for instance, in our air acoustics PhD with Bristol, they've got some really nice facilities that they've put together over the last few years, and we're interested in seeing those apply to our problem. So it does vary. In terms of contacts, I'd like minimum to have contact with any students I'm the industrial supervisor for quarterly, with some sort of formal meeting, whether online or in person. Generally, also, I just make myself available by email if there are any questions in the meantime. I think that's probably reasonably standard. And in terms of other contact through the year, I get my PhD students to come over to site to present their work as they've got something interesting to talk about. Usually that happens probably in the second year, towards the end of the second year. But also, one of the things we build into all our collaborations on PhDs is at least 3 months working on site with us. So you can get to see what we do, how we apply the techniques in industry, and we can get to learn a little bit more about you as well and see if you're interested in the industrial side of the topic.
Yeah, I think Adrian's probably covered it all. It does vary a lot between the projects, how much involvement. I have projects where I've got one with the RHS at the moment, Royal Horticultural Society, where they are on monthly calls, and they're really and that's what they want to do. But all of the projects will have regular touching points with industry. Adrian mentioned quarterly. It might be if they're on every monthly call, you might have formal meetings twice a year. So it's a really important part, because the industry are part funding the places. So it's important that the PhDs work for them as well as it work for you. And one of the questions I get asked often is, how fixed in stone are these projects? Well, there's some constraints because you're working with a partner who's got to be happy with what you do, but they will, as the project progresses, even from day one almost, they will evolve and change. And that will depend on your skill set. So maybe you come in with a slightly different skill set, and that will mean the project might be slightly better, might be productive slightly differently. And it might be that you find something out in year one which changes what's the best thing to do year 2 and 3. That's not unusual either. So that's all a negotiation. And that's the reason you need to be regularly talking to the project partners, because we need to be keeping everyone, and your supervisors, obviously, everyone in the room needs to negotiate how these things evolve. And that's how it happens. It's usually just a kind of discussion and an evolution of how things progress. So I hope that gives a sense of what happens with projects. There's a question here for Sarah about what a typical week looks like.
So bear in mind this will obviously change as you progress through the PhD, and I've only been doing it for a couple of months, so I can only give the perspective of a first year PhD student. In the definitely this first semester, trimester, whichever way you use, there's a lot of induction activities to begin with. It's not overloading. It's just obviously you've got to make sure you understand how the sort of home university works. So we have CDT stuff, which was all pretty much compacted into a week online, where we all introduced ourselves to one another and sort of got to grips with the sort of the admin processes. And then Salford have their own induction program, and it'll be the same for Bristol, Sheffield, and Southampton. And so for the first couple of weeks, at least, you'll be doing sort of induction bits. Once you've got past sort of that stage and you've had your initial introductions to your supervisor and things like that, it just kind of depends. I tend to have at least one sort of Teams meeting or call a day. And then the rest of the time, you just have to be quite good at managing your own time. So lots of reading for the first year, because obviously you're trying to form sort of the evidence base for your lit review, and how you've come to the conclusion that you're going to potentially be able to answer the question that you'd posed. Trevor mentioned that we have a meeting once a week, so we have one of them on a Friday morning. So I also prepare not prepare anything, but sort of write questions that any questions I have down to go to them. And if I've got any actions from the week before, I'll make sure I've done them. And yeah, I don't know. I think that's about it really. But I think you have to understand that it's not like a taught masters. You're not being, you don't get a timetable when you start. So you do have to be good at managing your own time and understanding where your priorities need to lie. And so, like I say, first year will very much be you're reading quite a lot, getting your head around things. You can sit in on modules as well, which is quite helpful. So I mentioned when someone said about is this an appropriate degree and things like that, I sit in on modules as well, so you can sort of get added to Blackboard and you can go and join lectures of some of the other masters courses, so you can sort of pick up once you've identified any gaps that you might have. So obviously most of the people have quite a strong physics background or maths background, whereas I don't. So I've jumped in a couple of different lectures and sort of workshops and stuff like that, just to try and fill in those gaps where I have them. But yeah, so I think it's hard to say what a typical week looks like because it'll depend on your project. But for now, yeah, lots of reading, catching up, making sure you know what you're doing, doing your induction thing, going to your meetings, and also definitely make time for a daily walk or something like that. You have make sure you get outside for a little bit just to keep you fresh is probably where my advice would be as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, it's a full-time job doing a PhD. So you have to be dedicated to this, and there is a mixture of how people work full-time. So I'm the sort of person who comes to the office nearly every day. I'm an at the office person. When you've got measurements on, you will be at the office because you can't do them elsewhere. But there are some people who, I know Sarah does, comes in and also mixes some of it at working from home. So that kind of happens as well. It's really important that you do come in though and develop the relationships with the group. We talked about the peer support. So a mixture is quite good. But some people come in every day. Some people prefer to come in 2-3 days a week. It kind of varies. Adrian, did I cut across you there?
No.
Oh, sorry, I heard something down the line. Oh, no, sorry, apologies. I keep going down the list because we've probably got loads of questions. Informal question, publications. Well, Sarah did have a publication. But I think undergraduate having a publication is relatively rare. Master students, a bit less so. You do not have to have a publication to get onto the CDT, but it does happen. We do have people with publications. Can you talk about doing an internship while working towards a PhD? Yeah, so there's kind of two forms the internship kind of might take. So it's an internship which directly feeds into, you're going to do a set of measurements or doing some prediction work or something which directly feeds into your PhD. And what you're learning there is about the world of work. Your PhD just carries on as normal. You just happen to be at the company learning about them and feeding into that. So I've just had a PhD student who's not on the CDT, who's just gone and done that in a company in America where his PhD kind of carried on. Sometimes you have placements where it's more like you're learning a new skill set, you're going to somewhere else. Again, so that might be a slightly different kind of feel. So my son actually studied in a CDT and he went to a university for his placement. So that happens as well. I think the thing here is if the project is associated with the company, the first thing is working out how best to work with the company. And Adrian mentioned a sort of 3-month placement. It might be a company thinks it's better to do a month every so often, and that might be best. So it's kind of it'll be negotiated with whatever's best for you for the placement. I hope that gives you a bit of a sense of what it's like. There's been some questions about, there was one about the supervisors, what if they don't respond. And I noticed the functional email account soundfutures@salford.ac.uk has been put in one of the replies. So definitely contact us by that and we'll try and answer questions like that. Which site should I apply to? Each site has a list of projects. So which project you apply for will determine what site you apply for. Okay, well, this is an interesting question, Adrian. What's the chance you're going to give them a job? I think might be this question. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, I saw that. It's a really good question. So it depends. So a PhD is 4 years. It's very hard in almost any company these days to say in 4 years' time we'll have a suitable vacancy. Well, what we'll say is I have recruited off PhD programs. in the past, and it kind of goes. There are three elements. One, do we have a suitable role coming up, and if we're really keen on the person, having worked with them for a couple of years, we may well be able to engineer a position to appear. It also might be that after working on the PhD program, and it's happened to me a few times, people have really enjoyed it, but they want to go and do something a bit different. So I've had my main work is in aerodynamics. I've had a few people that I've done supervised PhDs for that desperately wanted to go into Formula One for some reason, and they go off and do that, or they go and do something else. So there isn't a kind of formal requirement on either party to take up a job afterwards. So it just depends on opportunity and on the needs of both parties. So it could be that you decide to go a different direction, could be that we don't have the opportunity, or it could be we do. So it's one of those things. I think the word negotiation has come from Trevor quite a few times in this presentation. It's about negotiation, but it's also about recognizing the world's uncertain these days, and particularly from an industry perspective. We get our budgets agreed no further ahead than once a year, yearly. Apart from, we're really lucky that we do get commitment to support the PhD program all the way through in one go. We don't have to keep going back with a begging bowl, so that's kind of nice. But for most things we do, we only get permission at most a year ahead.
Yeah, and I think so. I think that'll be true of all industries. I don't think anyone can really commit to anything that far ahead. I think in terms of academia, if you get a PhD, the next stage is usually postdoctoral research, and that's usually about applying for money to unlock it from external funders. Is normally the process. There are some other processes around, but what I would say is one of the important things for the CDT is we have a career development plan, which all our PhD students have just done their first round of, where we're looking at where they want to go. I mean, this particular won't be such an issue in year one, but years 2 and 3, starting to think about, well, where do they want to go, and starting to prepare them for what they need to do, so they're in a great place to go on to what they want to do next. So that, those talks and negotiations Adrian would have, we'd hope to not get to the end of the PhD and then go, well, what are you doing next? That's not how kind of CDTs work. Can you elaborate on the international caps? Oh, well, there we go. Someone's asked me, so I'll have to tell you. So there's 2 caps. So the first cap is, can the university waive the international fees? So international fees are much more expensive than national fees. And if I have an international student at Salford, they have to agree internally not to charge international fees. So there's a limited number of international fee waivers available by the university. I happen to know at Salford, it is either 1 or 2 this year. But I can't remember the numbers at the other institutions. And then in Southampton, it's slightly, they've got some stuff with the EU as well. But basically, it's will the university accept only national fees for the students? And there's a limited number at each institution. Then there's a cap by our funder, EPSRC. They do not allow more than 30% open eligibility students. Those are ones who are basically got some of their funding paid by EPSRC, who are international students. So you could think maybe there's 30% maximum international, but I suspect it's a bit less than that because of the fee waivers. I hope that answers the question, but that's the detail. What type of acoustic project? I suggest dropping one of the Bristol supervisors, Maddie, would be a good one, an email to ask about. But there is a whole range. I mean, there is some of it's experimental, some of it's CFD, and I cannot pretend I'm not an aeroacoustician. I know, for example, JLR, you've got one this year, aren't you, in quiet vehicles? I don't know if that's experimental or prediction or a mixture of both.
That'd be a mixture of both. It will depend on the student, what the balance is like. But yeah, generally, it's nice if a student can experience both, because they're both really important tools in industry, and they both give you different levels of insight. So yeah, the project we've got with Bristol is looking at the aeroacoustics of low drag cars. So we're making cars lower drag. What does that do to the aeroacoustics? Do we know the answer to the question? No, we don't. And that's why we're asking a PhD student to spend 4 years thinking about that for us.
Yeah, and as alluded there, that can vary with the students. So it might be that the idea originally was very experimental, and it turns out they've got some really good prediction tools that they develop, which actually means you can accelerate the PhD that way. So that's a sort of discussion to have with the supervisors about what it might turn out. PhD is about mainly finding new things. I mean, yeah, the criteria for a PhD is you write this thesis up at the end of it. It's got to be a significant contribution to scientific knowledge. So there's got to be a gap in knowledge we don't know that you have filled. So that's the new thing. Oh, it's just moved. Sorry. Apply it to real life. So that's what you get. I think more from a CDT is because you're working with partners, there's more chance of it being applied. I mean, to be honest, most people's PhDs don't get directly applied. It's more a training process that then gets picked up. So if I take my PhD example, I did a lot of work on room acoustic diffusers. That can be a whole lot of real useful skills. It was only when I was a postdoc that I then developed a method that a company then picked up and ran with, and then I ended up designing diffusers around the world. So often it's the sort of the skills you've set and the base you've got then to then make the discovery that goes on and gets exploited. It depends on the project. We're not all Stephen Hawking who can sort of kind of revolutionize black hole research in our PhD. Shall I write to supervisor, get a potential chance first, or just prepare the research proposal? I would definitely talk to your supervisor just to get a sense of what the projects are like, get a sense of what they're like, and whether you want to work with them. And you know, so you're not having to second guess what the detail of the project and what they're looking for. Make sure you're a good match, and they can also do that as well. So do I have to write my own proposal? So on each project, it's got a paragraph or two. And there is in some projects, a slightly more detailed document in the background, which has been written with the person helping funding it. But that's the kind of starting point. So you're not writing a proposal. What you're doing is you're applying to that. So what you're doing is writing a 4,000-word statement about your background, how that fits, and what you think of your research and how it fits in with what you would do in that proposal. So that's kind of the question we're asking. So no, you're not writing detailed proposal like month 1, I'm going to do this, month 6, I'm going to do this kind of thing. But when you start your PhD, that will be one of the first things you'll do, will be write a more detailed proposal, especially for year 1. Any more questions? I'm sorry that Joanna couldn't join us. She was having problems, so obviously that carried on. But if you've got other questions, and as I said, one of the things I would do is talk to some PhD students, just drop us a message, contact details online, and yeah, Sarah's given some advice there. Sam, I think you just email and just say you're interested in this project on the CDT website. I see you're the supervisor. Would you mind if I ask you a few questions? What I would say is if you ask an academic who also have ridiculous inboxes of ridiculous number of emails, directed questions, you know, don't just say, just tell me all about it, because that's a way of not getting an answer from them. But ask them directly, you know, someone was asking you, like, do you think there's CFD modeling involved in this, or are you seeing this as mainly experimental? You know, be a bit specific in your questions. Any more last minute questions before we call it quits? Thanks for all of them. They've been great. A big thanks to Adrian and Sarah for coming along. That's much appreciated.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's been fun.
Good. Well, then everyone wherever you are, you may not be in evening time, but I'm going to go and have a good evening because it's dark in Britain now. So I'm going to go home. So to you, everyone, and thanks very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.